Okay, so good morning and welcome to Political Liaison of September 27th. Going to call the meeting to order. First beginning with any identification of any media on the line.
Victoria Gray from the Turtle Island News.
Good morning, Victoria.
Good morning.
That being said, I'll shift into number 2, which is any changes or additions in the adoption of the agenda. Looking to any changes or additions. Okay, seeing or hearing none, I'll look to an adoption of the agenda of the Political Liaison of September 27th, moved by Audrey, seconder.
I'll second Melba.
Second by Melba. Are there any further questions or comments? Seeing or hearing none, all in favor? Any opposed? Seeing or hearing none, motion's carried. We'll do declarations of conflicts as we move through the agenda. We have no delegations or presentations, which moves us right into the adoption of the Political Liaison Committee minutes of August 23rd. Looking to any questions, comments on the committee minutes?
I'll move on the minutes, Melba.
Okay, thank you, Melba. It's moved by Melba. Is there a seconder? Seconder to the minutes. I'll see Michelle. Are there any further questions or comments?
Oh, I have a question before I move.
Sure.
So
my
there's an
apologies.
action.
Sorry, go ahead, Michelle.
The action item list has been added, which is great. But has action been taken since our last meeting? Because I find that we move things, but there's no follow-up. So should we not be looking at that before we approve the minutes?
Yeah, thanks for that, Michelle. And again, we wanted to, our goal was to bring this back so that we do a better job, obviously, at follow-up on any items. So I think, moving forward, we can definitely start with the action items and then going into the minutes itself. But again, as we get back into the groove of the action item list so that our follow-up is more timely, we can definitely begin by looking at the action items first.
Comment, Mark?
I see and hear Helen.
Yeah, we have the thing with the non-approved, you don't approve the minutes because the action items don't look like they've been followed up. There's a lot of resolutions that need to get through so people can continue their work. If you don't pass the minutes and you're not approving the resolutions that were made at that meeting. So to me, approving the minutes and the action items are like different things.
Right.
Under the action items, there should be a line of the follow-up, not just saying, because before when we'd see the action items under follow-up, it would just say in progress. Well, what does that mean, in progress? What did you actually do? Did you have a meeting with someone or did you call this person? Or that's the part that needs to be fixed better so that we know what follow-up has been done and know that it's going ahead. But if you don't
Right.
approve the minutes, you're not approving the resolutions we made. And a lot of times they're timely, sensitive. People need that
Right.
information to continue their work.
Yes, so I am suggesting to do them separately as minutes and action items. So that again, we aren't holding anything up that is time sensitive. But again, as we get back into the groove of things and to Michelle's point, we'll definitely look to even yours as well, Helen, in relation to, the status of each of the action needed. So at this point, really just looking to the minutes. Are there any further questions or comments on the minutes? Okay,
Can I-
seeing or
it's
hearing
Melba,
none. Oh, sorry, go
Mark.
ahead.
Yeah, I agree with Helen. I think the minutes are the minutes, and when you get to the action item list, this is where we hear what has taken place, what you or other people have done in regards to the action. Thanks.
Definitely. Thank you for that, Melba. Are there any further questions or comments? Seeing or hearing none, all in favor?
Favor.
Any opposed? Seeing or hearing none, motion's carried. So just in relation to the action item list, and I know again, thank you for our staff for putting this together. Our goal really is to bring any motion that needs action in a timely manner on it, or if there's a motion that there's work currently in progress on a specific motion that was passed already. So that's where all of those items would go. So any of these, we're going to try to start to build this so that we see the progress of each of the motions in which council is looking for updates on. So obviously the first one is in relation to post-secondary funding. So I'll have to look to an update at our next PL on this piece. Again, just wanted to get in the groove of bringing action item back to council so that we get have our status to each of these as we move forward, along with our SAO as well, and any further items that he may need to follow up on. The other piece in relation to the Jordan principles, again, we've been making some, I guess, headway in a sense of, I'll talk with Christopher on this piece in relation to Jordan's principal issues and concerns that were raised. I know Councillor Helen has brought a number of those issues forward as well. So we'll look to provide a further update as well as at our next PL. And then the last one is just the collaborative table in relation to the enforcement piece. And I know Jill, I think Jill, is Jill on the line?
Yeah.
Good morning, Jill. Are you able just to touch base really quickly just on this item?
Sorry, guys. Yeah, sure.
Just really quickly, by virtue of status update on the collaborative table on enforcement and prosecution on First Nations laws.
Well, actually, Christopher would probably be better able to speak to this because he attended a few more of the meetings than I have. I've just been keeping an eye on it. So if Christopher wants to chime in, because I haven't actually been in attendance at the meetings. But certainly I
Okay,
can.
perfect. Thank you for that, Jill. So maybe I'll just touch base really quickly with Christopher.
Sego, good morning. Yeah, we've been on some of these collaborative table calls lately, but there needs to be a decision taken by the chief or by council about what our involvement is going to be going forward. I've sent an email update on that to chief, and we're going to be discussing how we engage with that going forward, because they are having a very general discussion, and the discussion as it impacts Six Nations has to be more focused, has to be more particular. It has to be specific to Six Nations circumstances. And the discussion at the moment is not. So, so I think it would be worth having a representative from council attending those meetings on an observer level. But if we're going to be contributing to that conversation, I think we need to have a sense first on our end of what it is that we are contributing there and to what end.
Okay, I agree, and thank you for that, Christopher. Just on that piece, on that action item. So again, as we do shift into getting more in the groove of providing this list, again, this is really to help us as well as the team, and just in relation to any follow-up directly from the council table. So we're going to continue. You'll obviously see this list grow and hopefully start to get to see some of these items be completed in a more timely manner.
Mark, it's Audrey.
Sure. Good morning, Audrey. Go ahead.
Good morning. Just to give you an update, I have called Julia Canlich and Marie Miracle about the post-secondary funding allocation update. So as soon as I get it, I'll share it with you and council.
Okay, that's great. Thank you for that update as well.
You're welcome.
I see Helen.
So it's recommended that someone sits at this enforcement and prosecution table, because me and Sherry Lynn have kind of taken turns attending. So do we stay there
Yeah, I think at this point that we just remain
as observers?
as observers.
And
Yes.
I think we need to make it clear to them. Will we tell them to take our name off that list? Have us listed as part of their thing. I don't know how we got on there,
yeah.
but we're on there. We're on
I
that
agree,
list. I
yes.
don't know how we got there.
Yeah, so that's something even further that the team, Christopher, Jill, all of us will look to those pieces and provide further recommendation. But I think at this point in time, we just stay there as observers so that we're not missing anything. But again, we need to also have conversations just in terms of what Christopher has laid out as well.
Yeah, because the only difference between us, which has always been, whenever we made our own laws, we always said we didn't need the province and the Fed's approval. That was always our stance right from a long time ago. When we made the matrimonial real property law, when we made the cannabis law, we're saying we're not asking the province and the Feds to approve these. So we already have our position. Although, to be honest with you, it isn't working because we can't get the courts or the police or anybody to recognize our laws. So I don't know whether we need to look at changing our stance somehow or not, because the police won't even enforce our laws because there's no place to enforce it anyways, because the courts don't recognize. See, when we did the matrimonial real property, we had a lot of meetings with all the judges in Bradford and everybody. We met with them a lot of times, me and Ava, and mostly me and Ava. And what we were trying to do was to get our law recognized in the court, because we knew we didn't have our own court. So we wanted the police and the court to recognize our law. But that's what we couldn't get. They wouldn't do that because the judges used to say to us, they can't do that because I guess it would have to come from the province for them to do that. So that's how that went. So we never did get our law recognized. So right now our matrimonial real property law is not even really effective because, number one, it isn't finished, and number two, we have nowheres to use it. Like, you know, when people are getting divorced, normally they go to the provincial court, family court, but we don't have a family court. We were intending to have that tribunal to take place of a court, but we've never set that up either. We never finished, we never did that. So, and the cannabis law, we just said we're going to do our own, but now the police are probably going to say they can't do our law because it's not part of the provincial law. remember, Mark, I don't know whether you were sitting there, I know Audrey and Hazel and everybody was there, but we tried to get, what we were gonna do when they did a new policing agreement, which they haven't done for I don't know how many years, it just keeps getting amended. We were gonna try and add our laws into that policing agreement. That's what we were gonna do.
Right.
So then our police
Yes.
could enforce our laws, but because they've never had a new agreement, it just keeps getting amended. We've never ever brought it up to do that. That was our intention. That way, our police could enforce our laws, and then we were going to try and get the courts to recognize them because we don't have a court. But we never made any headway with that either. So I don't know. Maybe I don't know. I just know that's how it's always been. So
Mark, it's Hazel.
Yeah, so we'll definitely, and again, Helen bringing up definitely good points for this piece of discussion on the action item. But I do see a number of hands being raised. I first want to check in with Nathan, and then over to Hazel, and then Christopher. So Nathan, you have the floor.
Thanks, thanks, Chief, and totally agree that we need a strategy on this, as kind of Helen's pointing out, and I think it's important to keep that information flow and being observers, and just underscoring we need to send a note to COO to inform them of our status so they don't assume things. And the only question I had for Christopher is there both a political and a technical table at this level for the collaboration, or is it just one table? That's my only question.
Well, there is a working group, which I sat in on a meeting of last week, but there are larger and smaller groups, and I'd have to get back to you on the specifics about what the mandate is of each.
Okay, I'd be interested in that. Thanks.
Thanks for that, Nathan and Christopher. Hazel.
Yeah, I'm just wondering, is there any way that some sort of a process or some type of agreement could be reached with the province in order that the laws and all of the work that Six Nations does, and like in terms of that matrimonial real property, do they enforce that now when people go to say divorce court? I thought they had to use what Six Nations has in their matrimonial, because to me, like if you have a document put together and all the work that's gone into creating it, and then in the end you can't even use it or nobody's going to recognize it, like it's such a waste of time. And it seemed like there's Six Nations really has no control, or not control, but maybe what they're attempting to do and what they're saying, like nobody wants to recognize that. Like, how do you get to the point, or who do you get to the point with to make some kind of an agreement? Because it must be difficult for our police too. Like sometimes our, I don't know. Okay, I'll just leave it there. Sorry.
No, I know, and again, it's all good discussion, and we'll look to again follow up on these pieces in terms of what Helen's raising as well. But I just want to check in with Christopher, and I go back to Helen.
Yeah, in follow to what Helen was saying, there are some things that Six Nations can and probably should do on territory to follow up on on implementing some previous decisions, on perhaps building up a more sui juris court system. I know there was some work done on, I think it was called the Joint Iroquois Tribunal. I think that might have been what Helen was referring to, that hasn't been fully stood up. So there are a number of things that should be discussed, I think, internally, but certainly vis-a-vis this collaborative table, securing provincial and federal recognition of Six Nations laws would be probably the top thing we'd want to raise, but we'd have to get on the same page first in terms of specifically what we're asking for from that collaborative table. Also, on the matrimonial and real property law, there is at least some sense in which that is recognized by the federal government because of the federal law on that issue. But that is not the case with the cannabis control law. So there's no automatic recognition of Six Nations laws, and I think that's kind of where this needs to go. If Six Nations is establishing a new law for itself, why is that not automatically recognized? And that's, I think, the conversation that needs to be had.
Definitely, and thanks for those points as well, Christopher. Helen, did you have your hand back up?
Yeah, well, that's the whole point. We're not asking the province and the feds to recognize our law. It's our law. We're supposed to be sovereign here. So we don't care if the province or the feds recognize our law or say, okay, the Six Nations got this law. What we want to do is figure out how we can enforce our law. We can only do that if we have our own system here in order to do that. Like right now, if say for the cannabis, if somebody gets caught doing something, nothing's going to happen because we can't take them to court. So it would be useless to even charge anyone. That's where Six Nations was left. And Christopher's right. We were supposed to do that tribunal for the matrimonial, and it was going to involve all the Iroquois communities. But we never did that. But in terms of getting recognition, that's not what Six Nations has been asking for. We don't care if the province or the feds recognize our law and say, oh, that's good, that's Six Nations law. We got to figure out how we're going to enforce our laws. And the only way we can enforce them is to get that. Part of the enforcement is getting it into the policing agreement. So the police have to enforce our laws. Right now, they don't have to. And then having a court of some sort or something to, because if we don't have that, it's useless. Our laws are useless and we can't enforce it anywhere. That's how it went before.
Yes.
This council might think differently, but over the years, that's how all the councils I've sat on in my 20 years thought about it. That's how they felt about it. So it just depends on how the council feels.
Right. And again, this is all good points of discussion. And so if we could just leave it, I think at this point in time, and we'll look to see as an observer status at that table and bring this further back for further deliberation, as Helen and Christopher pointed out, in terms of those key kind of topics and getting on the same page as we move forward. Is there any further questions or comments in relation to the action items?
Mark.
Sorry, I hear Wendy.
Yes. I don't feel comfortable leaving it on that note. I mean, the police do have the authority and they do have the means to charge. They do have the authority already. It's rests with the Crown, and that's where the stopping point is. So absolutely agree with what Helen and Nathan and others are saying, that we need a strategy, but we have to understand what powers are already in place with what we have to work with, right? So police do have that authority already.
That's a really good point. Thank you for that, Wendy, as well. And again, this is where we're trying to be strategic as well in relation to the policing agreement itself in those conversations as well. Okay, Council, is there any further questions or comments? That being said, I want to shift into number 6, and maybe just take a quick pause if there's any questions or comments in relation to the lifelong learning task force update. Maybe I'll just pause there, check in with Councillor Audrey. If there's anything that she would like to share in relation to further updates on lifelong learning. Oh, sorry, Audrey, you're on mute.
Sticky button there. Just that we have a new member to our committee of our lifelong learning task force. That's Reba Bombery will be with us for the next year. And she'll be working the capacity of the language lead. And she'll be working to determine how we can progress with language in this new system that we're putting recommendations out for how to improve language in the school system. You know,
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Noah, for that, Audrey. Is there any further questions or comments?
Hi, Mark, it's Wendy.
Hi, Wendy, go ahead.
Sorry. So two things. So given that Riva was on the core committee as a member, does that then open up that spot on the core committee now that she's taking on I guess a full-time contract role for the next year? That's one question. The other question is, it's a good update. I certainly appreciate it has all the information. So thank you for that. I don't know if this is the appropriate time or it's in another meeting, but when we had the update from ISC, from Travis, there were questions about the role of the task force and our representative, because there was indication that ISC is going directly to Audrey, and Audrey had talked about she was helping them to do different things and funding and, you know, the plan for return to school and all of those things. So that's outside of the task force. So are we expanding that now? Because it borders on taking over education and having that role. So how do we just understand better what that role is moving forward? Because that's very different than the update that we have on the task force about communication and recommendations. So the work being done and what we heard in that public meeting was very different. It's a different role. So just looking for clarity on what's changing. And if I've missed something in council, please let me know. Thanks.
no, nothing's changing, Wendy. That's the same thing that we've been doing. All I was doing was I attended a meeting. I found out where there was funding. It was supposed to be for summer school. I let Travis, our director of federal schools, know that so that he's aware, so that he can help use that money, hopefully to help give students more one-to-one or whatever he wants to do to help him help our students on Six Nations. So that was me forwarding information that I found to help our schools right now, presently. So that's basically all that was. I'm not taking over any roles. That's how I'm helping them. If I find any information that can help our students, I will relay that. And I hope that that's not objectionable to anybody. Yeah.
So Mark,
think
if I can
also too,
sorry.
Sure, just really quickly as well, just to add, you know, Travis and I do have regular conversations as well, just in relation to, you know, if there's any other further assistance from our office that we can be, or anything that needs to happen there as well. Back over to you, Wendy.
Yeah, and certainly admirable to support students and want to, you know, provide better services. So not questioning that at all. But ISC is the funder. And we're actually, in every meeting we have with them, we're asking them for more support and more resources and to put more funding into the schools to help students, whether it's tutorial or other. So if now we're taking on the role to look for funding and let them know so they can get the funding. I mean, they are the funder, right? So there's a bit of a, it's just a different situation. But it wasn't so much even getting the funding, but there were some other things where he said he was working directly with you, even on the school plan and things like that. So it's seeing more of an active role beyond that and the relationship. So that's all. I didn't know if it had expanded because the task force is one thing and there are other roles. So I just wasn't clear on what that was.
No, just to be clear, I have stated in public at a meeting that this money came from ISC. ISC sent money in our COVID money. It was directly for summer school last summer. We did not use that funding for summer school as we did not run a summer school. So that's the information that I made sure that Travis had so that he could then take that information and help support our students in our schools. I'm not looking for new money. I found old money that hasn't been used. So Travis now has that information. And Travis works with me. Travis shares documents with me, such as he's shared with all of the counselors, the opening school plan. And as I say that he's free to call me if he has any questions. I will share with him because he knows that I know a lot about education on Six Nations. So the role hasn't changed. If I can give him any kind of friendly advice, I will do that. Because I have the experience to give him some counsel if he needs it from time to time. But he hasn't asked for very much. And in fact, we just have a cordial agreement right now. We don't even have an agreement. We just talk cordially to each other now and again. So there is no role change. There is no new money. And there is no taking on any extra roles. Yeah.
Okay, thanks, Audrey. And then also too, I do recognize, I'll go to Helen next, but also if you could just clarify, Audrey, on Reva's role. So did a position open up on the task force, or how was, I think, the first
Yes,
question of
We
Wendy's?
have two new people who have gone on there, and that is Diane Longo, and we have Darren Thomas. And now we're looking for a youth to be on the team as well. Thank you.
Okay, thanks for that. Thanks for that, Audrey. Helen.
Yeah, no, I can see where Wendy is going. Because I noticed that myself when Travis was talking, he said, we're working with Audrey to do this, we're working with Audrey to do that. So I think probably what she's referring to is the fact they're seeming to treat Audrey as the education leader, I guess, or the education task force chairperson or something, I don't know. And I don't know. I noticed that too, because I wondered, what is he? It was always working with Audrey. And I thought, well, is she taking on a role as the chairperson of the task force or something? Are they looking on it and I'm not saying Audrey, I'm saying ISK. Are they looking on Audrey as the person running education? Our education task force, our education system, or whatever it is we're doing? That's what I was thinking when I heard him say that as well. And I'm not saying anything to Audrey, but it's Travis was doing that. That's what how ISK is looking at it. They're the ones that are doing that.
Helen, I want to assure you that's not true.
I heard them. I heard them at the meeting.
What he said and what he meant, I think, are two different things. I don't go and meet with him. I don't have any in personally. He's not asking about anything.
No,
on
I didn't.
policy
I'm not
or
saying
money
that. I
or
didn't
anything.
say that, Audrey. I didn't say you were meeting with him. I'm saying ISK is treating you as the go-to person for all that stuff. It's like they're thinking you're chairing, probably the chairperson, because you're the head of that task force. So I'm thinking in their heads, they're looking on it as you heading up a school board or something, because you know how ISK is. That's my thinking.
Yeah, and I think
okay. Well,
that's where I can just interject really quickly. This is no problem to have a conversation with Anne and Scott, and just to have that clarified. Just again, because it did seem that way in a sense as well. But we can always, further, Audrey's clarifying right now, get that further clarified with ISK to say that, it looks to, full chief and council on anything when in relation to education at this point. And really look to, I think really it's going to be beneficial to have the recommendations come forward from the task force so that we can once and for all look to what is our position, and which also Nathan is referring to in his message within the chat. So I think nonetheless, just further clarifying, it's already been addressed and clarified. There's nothing else changed within the mandate. We can even have a conversation with Anne, but really I think the end goal of this conversation is looking to those recommendations that will be forthcoming in relation to next steps here.
So Chief, can
Are
I
there any?
ask a follow-up to that?
Sure. I'll go to Michelle and then over back to Helen.
Two questions. First, when you indicated we have the two positions were filled, were those posted? Because I don't recall those being posted, but I'm a little confused now because I've asked this question, and I mean, I agree with Helen and Wendy. Seems like we're taking over education, but the task force was put in place to develop recommendations. And my understanding is they had an extension until January, and then the task force is done. Yet we've just hired somebody for another year. So I'm can someone explain to me? Because I thought I understood the process. So I'm just looking for some clarification.
So if I could, the task force continues on. We only have done the K to 12. We next have to do the early years and post-secondary. As we've said before, and Heather Watts has stated that that'll be done around, the first one done around. And it may be, times may change yet too, because of all the work that has to be done for the recommendations. Then we go on to, for next year, early years and post-secondary. So all of that will have all that research and material have to be gathered in order to make recommendations to the community. So will be ongoing. It'll just continue on and until the recommendations are all done. And it doesn't stop. It'll come to council when all the recommendations are done. It'll come to council. It'll be council decision on where we're going from there. No one's trying to take over education. Everybody knows what the mandate is. Everybody's operating inside of it. And if ISK has that kind of a belief, that's ISK's belief. It's not my belief. My belief is we're the sheriff. We're making recommendations. We're staying inside our mandate. Yeah.
And can I just ask a final question? So what's the time frame?
The time frame keeps moving, so it's an evergreen thing. When we get going with this, it depends on how long it's going to take us to do the early years and post-secondary.
Mark, it's
Okay,
Hazel.
thank
Keep
you.
you posted as we keep moving along. Yeah.
Okay, and that's exactly what these updates are for, so that we have these conversations and all can be on the same page. I see Helen and then Hazel.
No, I was going to ask the same question. Like, when is this supposed to be done? Because it's been what now? 3 years, 4 years? I want to see this done in my lifetime. You know, before I want to be able to see what's going on with education before I head off to the happy hunting ground. So how long is it taking? Like, the first one only took 3 years, I think, and the second one took 2 years. We're going on to 3-4 years now, and we still haven't finished. So how long there's got to be a deadline. There's got to be a deadline to say we're going to be done in this month of 2022 or something like that. I would think. I don't know. Can it go on forever?
No, Helen, we'll get back with a deadline for it once we get into the early years and post-secondary and see what the scope of work is that has to be done there. But thank you. We'll get a deadline for you as best we can. But thank you for asking those questions.
Okay, thanks. Thanks for that. I want to stop and look to Hazel, and then I see Darren has his hand up. Hazel, you have the floor.
Yeah, I would just like to say that when this first began, like I know Audrey and Ava had gone to Toronto a couple of times, and it was just the beginning point of it all. But I've sat on that task force, and the meetings, there is so much discussion on so many areas of education, and I can see why this has taken this long and needs to take longer, because the coverage of everything in terms of education has, in my mind, from what I've heard, has been addressed, like the special needs and all kinds of stuff. So I think with the education for our kids, if we need to take 5 to 8 to 10 years, they still deserve the best. And if this task force ensures that our kids get the best, then the job will be well done. I think in terms of Audrey, being a teacher for that many years, people do look to her because she has that expertise in that area. Just like any of us as counselors, we go to somebody who we know has expertise in certain areas to talk to them so we can gain more knowledge on it. So I think when this is all said and done, and when we reach the end of this whole thing, it'll be a referendum vote from Six Nations. Until then, it's just all work in progress. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Hazel, for your comments as well. Darren.
Just quickly, I did have a chat with Heather Watts as well in relation to her update. So she committed. We agreed that she would come to the next political liaison to provide a little more in-depth in terms of the work plan. Because I know if you look in the work plan, October, November is when the engagement for phase 1 is set to be completed. So I figured it would be timely to have her. She actually offered to come today, and I said, well, let's wait till October relative to the work plan. We can have a more in-depth discussion on all these matters. So just wanted to update everybody on that.
Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you for that, Darren, for that update. Michelle.
So, okay. So the mandate it sounds like it's pretty wide open because I'm not hearing that there is a time period. Is that correct? So we're looking at education from birth to PSC, I would assume. So is the task force, Audrey, aware of what's going on in PSC?
For secondary education, yes, I'm on the GRIP seal, and we basically have just hired a company right now, an organization to do research on post-secondary, and that findings will be shared with council, it will be shared with Chiefs of Ontario, it will be shared with us as well. So yes, we are working in collaboration. So thank you very much.
So yeah, I sit at that GRIP seal board too. And so yeah, we've hired somebody for Six Nations, but do we know the landscape as you, as the lead of the task force, understand the national landscape?
As much as the next person, Wendy or Heather, Michelle.
Okay, thanks, Michelle, for your question. So obviously, Audrey will come back
Well-
and further to Darren's comments, because I think that's obviously there's still more work and questions that need to be answered from council, so that we're again all on the same page. That's what it sounds like. So looking to the next PL to have a further in-depth conversation on lifelong learning to answer some of these questions. Helen?
Yeah, I would like to know what's going on with the national whatever. Like, we should be knowing that. Why do we not know that? Something's going on with it.
Looking further to Michelle. Oh, I see Wendy has her hand up.
Yeah, I can help you with that. So there's been a 3-year strategy for post-secondary education engagement that came out of the last submission from the AFN in 2018. There was a national report on post-secondary education. The outcome of the budget in that year resulted in a 3-year commitment to doing this PSC engagement across Canada. In Ontario, they were allocated funding, and it was divided between the PTOs, and Six Nations is one of the communities that received funding as well. So this is the final year of that engagement process with a submission going forward. There was some things going on through the AFN and talk about a proposal submission going forward with the MC to cabinet. I think that's been delayed somewhat, but it will be going forward to the Chiefs, I think in November. More information on this, and again to the Chiefs and Assembly through the AFN in December, and looking likely for that proposal submission in February 2022. So this is the final sort of time crunch for the end of that 3-year PSC engagement. So not sure, I can't speak for Six Nations directly. Michelle and Audrey are with Gripsio, so I'm not sure what's happened with that engagement process and what that submission is in the funding that's been received by the community. So in terms of timing, it's actually critical timing for post-secondary education and what the outcomes will be, because if a policy proposal goes forward, that means looking for authorities under the federal government, new authorities under post-secondary education. So that's just there's a lot of detail, but that's a quick snapshot of what's happening. Thanks.
Oh, thank you for that. But that brings my point too. I've always maintained that people sitting on these external committees are supposed to be reporting to council so that we know what's going on. I didn't know all this was going on because I don't sit on that committee, but what's happening is we all sit on these external committees, but we're not reporting to council what is happening, especially if it's relating to us. And that's what we're supposed to be sitting there for, to report to council what's going on. So that's why I'm clueless about what Michelle's talking about, because I never heard of that, other than reading bits and pieces here and there and not knowing what I was reading. It's never come to the council table from the committee members that this is what's happening at post-secondary. And it's going to impact us.
So
And
Helen,
it's like
just
that for all the committees. I'm saying all our external committees. We're supposed to be reporting to council. That's why we're sitting there.
so
Anyway.
Just for clarity, Helen, I don't sit on, sorry. I just want to clarify, Mark, I don't sit on that committee for Six Nations. So this is just my own knowledge that I'm able to share with you.
Oh, I know you don't.
And just and thanks for that, Wendy, as well as that update. And I think as well to Helen, to your comments, you know, I think this is where we've discussed even in our retreat of that reporting template across the board, right? And I think that's where if we can at least come up to agreeing what that template looks like, so that we can, you know, be able to have more of these consistent reports back from external committees that counselors, including myself, sit on. So just you know, as part of our admin team, political team, you know, looking to generate that template and to bring that back so that we can start to get into the motion of reporting regularly to full council. Nathan, did you have your hand up?
No, I was just going to underscore what you just said. You covered it, so I put my hand up. Thanks.
Okay, perfect. Thanks. Thanks for that. Melba, sure, go ahead. You have the floor.
Yeah, we seem to be talking a lot about information flow. So I'm just wondering if an organizational chart would be of help. The next meeting from the lifelong learning, we seem to be, such as Riva being on board now, and are they going to have others? Because it sounds like we're going back to a certain extent of what happened before in education here. As I had pointed out, and others probably have, we had a lot of people that were, I guess, specialized and put in certain areas, such as, I think it was Linda Stotts. I think she was in the position of language before. So there's a lot here, and are they going to be adding more? And if so, what is the plans for more organization additions, I guess? So I think an organizational chart would help to a certain extent. Thank you.
Thanks for that, Melba. And so, you know, from Darren's comments as well, we'll look forward to having Heather in at the next political liaison meeting next month to really go into depth and further detail on some of these items being raised this morning. Are there any further questions or comments in relation to the lifelong learning update? Again, Heather will be joining us next month for further conversation on that piece. Okay, seeing or hearing none, I want to shift right into the Chiefs of Ontario Kiwi Advisory Group. And Jill has been doing some on this piece as well.
Mark, before we move on, are we supposed to set that for information?
Oh, my apologies. Thank you for that, Michelle. Yes, just looking for a motion to accept as information. Moved by Michelle, seconder. Thank you for that, Michelle.
I'll second, Nathan.
Second by Nathan. All in favor? Any opposed? Seeing or hearing none, motion's carried. Again, thank you for that, Michelle. Number 7, the Chiefs of Ontario Keyway Advisory Group. I see Wendy.
Hi, Mark. Sorry, thanks for that. I just have some questions about this entire piece of it, and I see the recommendation that's coming from administration through the SAO. But I'm wondering if we should ask the lead from the Survivor Secretariat to be a part of this as well, Kim Murray, is because of her extensive knowledge about burials, about legislation, about everything, to be there to pull that information. I see that they're saying that there's nothing to do with the residential schools and what's going on. But if I'm not mistaken, this actually is coming over, or Indigenous Affairs is a part of this as well. I'm concerned that there is implication. And my understanding is that there are needed changes to do with burials. So having somebody in addition to Tanya sitting there for information and pulling that back, because I think there's implications, and that's my concern on this. And when I look at the very complicated org chart, I mean, this is massive. So I'll stop there.
Okay. Thank you for that, Wendy, for bringing that suggestion forward. We'll look to further discussion and including Kim's name if agreeable to full council. Nathan?
I just wanted to kind of acknowledge the information that we have on this, because I think it's good to look at terms of references before we agree to participate on committees. And I see the work has shifted on this particular committee. But further to Wendy's point, I think that was the glaring piece for me that was missing, is that crossover, because I think Wendy's right in terms of the natural kind of progression of the work as it relates to the residential schools now. And I don't think this committee will be able to help itself in terms of being able to engage in that. So I would be supportive as well of Kim being engaged in this and looking at representation further than at the technical level. To also, I understand there's a political level table as well, to kind of look to occupy that as well. So just some thoughts at this point, but I think before we move on this, we should get the reaction from the survivors as it relates to these pieces.
Okay, great comments, and thank you for that, Nathan. I want to pause really quickly, if we can, Jill. I just want to check in with Jill. I know has been able to, part of this work as well, just to provide any further context to this as well. And then I'll shift over to Melba. Jill, I just want to check in with you.
Sure. It could be that there will be a blend at the Chiefs of Ontario. At this time, there isn't. They have hired a new individual to lead this particular file, and she's brand new. So when she's looking at the terms of reference, she isn't aware of that. They have a brand new director as well in the Justice Department as well. So she's looking at it with a fresh pair of eyes. So she's, in speaking with her, she's wanting to move forward, and her understanding is a complete separation. But I agree, the possibility of there being overlap for sure exists within the organization. So yeah, I would agree with that. So the appointment, Kim on that, I think would be helpful. I'm not sure, but I still go with the recommendation of a political appointment for a period of time to actually see what this working group is going to do outside of those terms of reference, because those terms of reference have not been reviewed by the table, nor have they been approved. So you're looking at terms of reference that were used previously, but the table has not approved or even reviewed them yet, because that table hasn't come together. Just the technicians table has come together. If that offers any insight
And
or
if
clarity.
I could try to add in to Jill.
Sure,
So
sure.
this
Go ahead,
com-
Tanya.
So hi, I'm Tanya Hill Montour. I'm labeled as Taylor here. So I could probably add a bit of clarity in regards to this. So this initially began in 2008 and it sat idle for a bit there. But the initial action plan, which, you know, when they began this committee, was to reparate our ancestors who are sitting currently on shelves in museums. So I think it's great that we do incorporate Kim, because obviously we've had a huge shift in, you know, the recent findings and discoveries, and it would be important. So because it's going to change the whole dynamics of this group, because this initially was information and network sharing. You know, it never actually delineated that. We never really had, from my understanding of just paperwork of notes from Joanne Thomas, there really, you know, really wasn't a huge, the network sharing wasn't really as it should have been. But my understanding of this is that, you know, it's all our ancestors that are currently on the shelves. We need to bring them back to the community. We need to have them in a dignified burial. And right now, we don't know what the new task force with Kim, like how it's gonna sort of connect.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Sorry about that. I'm kind of in Taylor's office and it's kind of.
No problem. Thank you for that, Tanya, for that overview as well. So looking to any further comments or questions, I mean, I would see it as a beneficial to include Kim at this time. If I know obviously Kim is quite busy, but to add this, I think would be beneficial. Looking to any other comments around that piece, in addition to Tanya,
Melba?
that is. I'll shift over to Melba, then back over to.
Yeah, it's timely that we're discussing this because as some of us know that we're at the burning of tobacco last week at the Mush Hole by Jock. Well, he asked that question at the end. Where are people going to be buried when we find people? And we didn't exactly talk about repatriation at that point, but there was really no answer because Kim is now getting to that question and action. So we don't have, I guess, answers for some of these things. And as for, you know, Barb in the past, I guess we're quite lax in not taking part continuously of her work, and her and Joanne, I guess, now that Joanne is gone. So I guess we're picking up the pieces now and looking at what we're going to do about returning people as well as artifacts, I guess. So it's a timely situation that we have here. And of course, we need people like Jock. Barb used to call on Orrin Green, who was Larry Green's, not Ponytail Larry, the other Larry on Six Line. He's brother, and also Hubert Sky, and sometimes clan mothers to assist in when there was decisions to be made about burials. So maybe we can get back to that further discussion. That's what I have to say. So looking forward to having that discussion at council as well as at the secretariat level. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Melba, for your comments. Wendy.
Yeah, really happy to hear that we seem to all be on the same page, and certainly Jill and Tanya, that, you know, there could be implications. And I think it's great to get in front of this, and, you know, whatever's going to happen. You know, if having Kim involved, there's cultural monitor, so there's all sorts of pieces in place that will support this. So my question is, do we need to add to this recommendation number 1, or do we make a second recommendation to add to it to pull Kim in to be a part of that?
Okay, thanks for that, Wendy. I'm actually going to just pause, and I know Jill had her hand up as well, and maybe can further guide us in whether we add or look to another motion. Jill?
Sure. Sorry, I forgot what I was going to say when I initially had my hand up. Could have been that important. But I think you probably can just add to this motion, or add to what's on the table now for Kim's participation. But the other thing is the appointment of the political appointment from this table, because that's separate from the technical table at which Tanya sits at now for Six Nations, unless this council sees Kim as being that political representative appointment. I'm not sure, because really, under the terms at this point, even though they're not, those terms of reference are not approved, it is a knowledge keeper, elder, political representative for Six Nations. They're kind of working off the other terms of reference for language, because really there is nothing else for them to work from at this point, because the person who holds the file at Chiefs of Ontario is new as well. She's new to the file as well. So she's taking her direction from the director, who is new as well. So in fact, there is no terms of reference for this particular table. So, I mean, I still think that in the recommendation, we were talking about a 6-month period, because we need to see what this table is going to actually do, and whether it's going to be in the best interest of Six Nations. And to add Kim to that as well, we can just, you know, change the wording here in this one.
Okay, thank you for that, Jill. I do see Wendy and then Nathan, and then we'll look to next steps here.
Thanks, Mark, and thanks for that, Jill and Tanya. So I just think, is there any way that we can hold this until tomorrow to General Counsel? That gives an opportunity, Mark, for you or whoever to reach out to the Survivor Secretariat and Kim and figure out how best to do this. Sorry, I don't think we can add Kim under the SAO, because it's just, the structure isn't there, right, in terms of that flow. And then identifying knowledge keeper, elder, political representative, I think that's different. So whoever that is from this table or other, just gives us a day to do that. I'm in agreement.
Yeah, no,
just figuring it out.
Yeah, so it's the logistical pieces to this, and how we look forward or move forward rather, and we can bring this to the Secretariat as well. So is that kind of your thinking, Wendy, for tomorrow?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Is there any opposition to that? So we'll look to bring this item back tomorrow after just a deliberation with Survivor Secretariat. Okay, so I'm not hearing any opposition. So we'll look to those that as next steps, Council, bringing this item back for tomorrow, and then look to next steps as we go from there. As for the number 2, we'll continue to, we'll add this all as a package. So we'll have to have a little bit of conversation in terms of a knowledge keeper, elder, or if it's just that political rep in its entirety on that piece. So we'll bring this item back for discussion tomorrow, and then look to where we go from there. I want to shift in then to the console, the CAP process, CAP team update, which is within your Dropbox. Maybe if I could just check in with Lonnie or whoever, Taylor, will be walking us through any important pieces of the update.
Yeah, Mark, I'm here.
Sure. Good
Yeah,
morning.
this was a request from council to have monthly updates on what the CAP activities are. So we're going to be starting that process every political liaison, and this is the first one. So we did prepare a report for everybody to see what the CAP team is involved with, and I have Robin here as well as Taylor. If there are any further questions that I can't answer, they're heavily involved in this as well as me.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for that, Lonnie. Are there any questions or comments for the CAP team on the line? I see Nathan, and then over to Wendy.
Chief, and thanks for the material, Lonnie. It was good to kind of go over some of these items. In particular to the CAP team discussions, I was reviewing some of these and some of them made sense at a number of levels to be in a CAP team kind of discussion. But a couple of them were kind of glaring out to me, and I was wondering why they were here. One was the YMCA in terms of providing the services that they have and extending them to Six Nations community members. I guess for me, like some of those things, do they belong at CAP or do they belong with other areas? Because YMCA provides services. And I would think we all have access to it anyway. So it's just what's the extent of those discussions and what was the thinking of why they're at this level?
Okay, yeah, remember when the YMCA Laurier were going to be building this facility? Maybe you don't remember. It was back in 2010, and so it became a responsibility because they were actually building in the downtown of Brantford, which is part of the Brantford surrender of the so-called Six Nations surrender of the Brantford town plot in 1830. So we had an interest in what was going on in the development of that land. So it became, part of the consultation process to find out they're developing. So what benefits can we obtain from that? So those carried on. Both Phil Montour and myself were involved, and at times Chief William Montour and then as well as Chief Ava Hill and actually Polytech even was involved in discussions, and as well as Matt Jameson. So what we never ever did come to a resolution of any benefits that we were received. So the YMCA was certainly aware of that, and the university as well. And so we decided, let's initiate contact and bring this back up, because it was a consultation subject at one time. So we had a meeting with the representatives in August of this year at their new building. Actually, it's quite an impressive building. And from there, we are going to have the YMCA do a presentation or be available for questions of the senior administrative team, the CAP SAT team, at the next SAT meeting in October. So, because it's a question of services. Well, what services might YMCA be able to offer to Six Nations? And and we have people like in the health area and also in social services, what might be more knowledgeable on what services might be available that Six Nations could avail themselves from the YMCA. I know at one time we were talking about all Six Nations members being able to use the facility free of charge, but that doesn't seem to be possible in this day and age because of COVID. The YMCA is suffering financial hardships, and even though, and they just recently opened again. And so we're looking at other areas where we could possibly benefit from the fact that, they are developing in our claimed area in downtown Brantford.
Okay, thanks. Now that I know it's linked to a build and use of land, it makes more sense. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Thanks for that. I just want to just really quickly before I go to Wendy, Taylor, did you have anything to add to that specific piece?
I was just gonna add that they've asked to come to the November meeting instead of the October meeting, as it works better for their schedule.
Okay.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Thank you for that, Taylor. Wendy.
Yeah, thanks for the report and all of the information. Some of it I'm not, and I'm looking at the ongoing CAP team discussions and that summary. Some pieces it's easy to understand what it is. Others it's quite vague and not sure what that means. The Lake Erie ITC connector project, ongoing updates regarding status of project. What is that? What is the status of the project? Updates on current projects and how they can consult and engage us more effectively. Anything where I see consultation, it raises a red flag for me. I think some of these things are political rather than technical in terms of having those discussions. Especially when I read the section about the meeting with developers and talking about accommodation. I mean, those are things that I would think should be at this table first to see if that's even the direction that we want to go, and then CAP moving forward after that. And there's a lot of pieces around consultation, improved process, Brantford and other areas. And it just raises some flags for me. I mean, I still have questions about CAP. I know that you've reported and you've shared information, and there's a number of people that sit on CAP, and a lot from your department, Lonnie. But I'm wondering, I'm of the belief, and I've raised comments before. I think it makes more sense for all of this work to be initiated under the elected chief's office, because there are, political advisor and other advisors in that elected chief's department. And then once that's assessed, and then having going to a CAP team to follow up and do that work and then bring it back. I think it just, that way it's easier to figure out what's political and what's work in progress moving it forward. Because, the way historically things have happened, they come to this table after the fact, after everything's been negotiated, after everything's been done at CAP, and then we have to accept it or not, and then it's this push and pull back and forth. So I think there's a number of things in the air of what's happening in the province and across the country, and impacts to Six Nations. And I think we have to look at what we're dipping into and how we're doing that. And just overall, and again, I'll raise an example is with the work under the Secretariat, the Survivor Secretariat, and the searches and the finding of bones and other pieces. When I look at some of these land pieces, there's a crossover and there's an implication. So what are we doing with that? So I see a lot of political pieces to this, and it's a flag.
Okay, thanks, Wendy, for your comments. And I do, look to, your suggestion raised as well in terms of, we've been having these conversations of process and how we best move forward, because obviously, regardless of whichever project or we find ourselves in, it always ultimately relays back to our table. So, the points you're raising are definitely good points in terms of, what is deemed political and what is deemed more technical. So I think those pieces are definitely worth having further discussion on in terms of next steps and where we exactly go from those pieces. Are there any further questions or comments? I do again like the suggestion and want to see how we can best move forward in that area in terms of process, so that again we can all be able to have this conversation on the same page. Is there any further questions or comments in relation to any updates within the report?
I do.
Sure. Over to you, Helen.
Yeah, I don't agree. I don't have a problem with the process the way it is now. I do agree with Wendy in the one sense of it hasn't very often come to council first to say, what is it you want? What do we want from this? What do we want from this development? Do we want to get this? Do we want to get that? Do we want to ask for this or that? That never comes to council. She's right on a point that by the time it comes to us, it's already kind of decided what we're going to ask for. So I agree that needs to be looked at, but going through the chief's office, I have a big problem with that because our chief's office, Christopher and Jill and them, they weren't hired to be knowledgeable about land issues and all that kinds of stuff. And the people working at the lands resources, that's what they were hired for. So I don't agree at all with it going through the chief's office. I think it just has to, I think the CAP team comes to council or Lonnie or whoever to say, okay, we got this opportunity to do development with, let's say, Mackenzie Meadows. What is it we want to ask? What do we want to ask for? What do we want? And that kinds of stuff. And then Lonnie's team would go out and negotiate. That has always been missing from the time I've been sitting here. Even Matt. A lot of times Matt had everything all done before he'd come to council and ask us to approve it. So we didn't have input into what it is we thought we should have and that kinds of stuff. So I agree that needs to be changed. But I don't agree with it going through the chief's office. I think there's enough stuff going through there without them having to deal with land issues.
Okay, thank you, Helen, for your comments.
Mark,
Well, a good conversation to have, and I think this is one of our key pieces with this council as well is trying to obviously increase the transparency to when we have start these conversations with developers from the very onset of the beginning, and then shifting into what the current process is. So it's nice to have this conversation with obviously community on the line as well, so that we can be able to say what is the best process. When we look at these pieces, I do see Audrey has her hand up, and I believe Lonnie also was looking to make comments. So I'll start with Audrey, then over to Lonnie. Oh, sorry, Audrey, you're on mute.
Yeah, I've got this sticky button on this computer here. Anyway, I commend the CAP team for the work that they've done over the number of years and all the acquisitions that we have. And that's truly worthwhile for Six Nations because we're hopefully getting more land back because we have such a growing population. So they're doing a great job there. One of the things that I think that we can improve on as well is the information being brought back to us. We have 2 reps from council who sit on the CAP team, and we've had very little information being brought back to the council table. And if we had more communication brought back, that would have been made a big difference in the last year and a half. So I think that's something that I think we have to look at. And I do agree that people should be reporting back. Everybody should be reporting back to the committees that they are on. And I look forward to getting that template so that we can see the reports and what's going on, so that we don't have to wait for the CAP team to come here and tell us all the time. So now we're going to see them every month. And I guess that's a good thing. And I'm not sure basically where the chief's table sits on theirs. I think Mark and Christopher and Jill would have to tell us what expertise they have on land claims and et cetera, in order to make those types of decisions. I would need more information for that. Yeah.
Thanks for that, Audrey, and agree, you know, as we do shift and move forward towards the reporting and so forth. I think it's also, you know, from council's, you know, why we have requested these monthly updates in terms of that communication, in addition to reps at that cap table. But definitely we'll look to those pieces as we move forward here. I'm just going to check in with Lonnie, and then I see Nathan has his hand up.
Yeah, if I could, Chief, you know, a lot of the things we do are actually negotiations, right? I mean, after a while, I suppose you become principally negotiators, and so you know, I heard council say that yes, we need to be made aware at the beginning of what you're talking, who you're talking to, and possibly what it's about. But you know, that's creates a little problem in a sense that when we say, for instance, are talking to a new developer that we've never conversed with before, and we have some ideas about what we want, and of course they have some ideas of what they're going to be offering, but I don't think it's bring it to council. Some of those matters in open session is not a very good idea, because you're letting your negotiations positions be made public, and I don't think in some instances that's not a good idea. You know, the monthly updates, yes, that's a good idea, but there are some things that should go in camera rather than be for discussion purposes in open session. So I mean, we can look at doing that, and we did have the chief and Nathan were supposed to be a part of our CAP team, and we kept inviting them to meetings, but never heard no response, and so you know, and these meetings had to go on, so because we're continually being asked by governments, by municipalities, by developers that they want to talk about things with us, because they know that their developments are within the claimed areas, and so it is a lot of work. It's not something that you know, you just do once a week, or sometimes where you have 8 or 9 meetings with people a week. So it is. We have to look at how we're going to structure that. If you want to say council wants to be involved, then we had asked council to put together something so that we can go forward and maybe revise the policy. And we have worked on revising that policy ourselves and sent it out to council, but we haven't had any feedback yet. So, you know, it's something we need to really sit down and talk about. How is this going to work in the real world? Where, you know, we're talking about negotiations, not about meeting with people to say, oh, it's interesting what you do, and here's what we do, and leave it at that. There's more involved than just, you know, meeting with people to talk about anything.
Okay, thanks, Lonnie, for your comments. And I think in terms of, you know, that's what Audrey's point was in terms of the reporting templates and so forth, because it's a skill base too, right? To be able to sit at that table and what you're referring to. I mean, obviously on my office, I'm sure Nathan, you know, we don't have time to be meeting 8 or 9 times a week, which is where I would see, you know, your team taking over on some of those pieces. But definitely, I think just for information purposes, to be at that table in which we've been discussing, you know, looking at that process and what it actually will look like moving forward. Nathan?
Yeah, thanks, Chief. And just so council's aware, this is the 3rd time, and I kind of want this recorded now. This is the 3rd time I've asked for another counselor to sit in my place because of the time commitment. I recognized, and this is the 3rd time I've recognized this, that I don't have time. And if we want to give this attention, somebody should step forward on this. So again, this is like Groundhog Day for me. I repeat myself time and time again, and I guess I should expect a different result. But anyway, to the other aspect is the scope of this in the process. I think it's important for us to begin identifying roles and responsibilities going forward. Because Wendy's right, the negotiation aspect of this part, that's political. And I think that's where we need to build in a good solid process. And I'm kind of looking at it from this standpoint. I see the notification period and the technical piece being very important at the front end. So we get notified by a developer or a proponent, they give us the information, we communicate out to the community what that impact is. The next stage is if there is an impact, then we get into those negotiations. That's the political side of things. That's where council has to be involved on that front. And then, you know, there's that ongoing process where we're informing the community with a number of things. Sorry, we have to also inform the community as we go out in each of those processes to say, yes, there's an impact. Here's the information. Here's where we're going with this. That's kind of the process that I'm looking at in terms of ensuring that everybody stays in their swim lanes and we have the proper people negotiating, we have the proper people vetting the technical information because like Councillor said, we're not technically savvy as it relates to the development aspect of things. And then, you know, that community notice and getting out to the community is so important. So, you know, I appreciate the work that's been laid out, but I think I need to start seeing what that process is going forward so that we have a good understanding. Again, notification, receiving the technical information. If there is an impact, then we go into negotiations, and that involves the community council and a lot more folks. So I'll leave my comments there. I know we're doing work on this, and I look forward to seeing the back end of that work to see it more effective of a process that works for the community.
Okay, thank you, Nathan, for your comments. Again, good points raised there. And we'll look to, you know, I've also acknowledged you coming forward with you know, looking to a new representative on the CAP team, as obviously you've mentioned and laid out the time commitment to this piece. But I think that's where again we have to get even more, you know, in terms of how we best move forward. So, you know, is that necessarily a counselor to sit there? Is it necessarily be able to have conversation with full council on specifically on this issue? Is it a standing item as opposed to just leaving responsibility on myself, counselor? You know, I think that there's definitely ways that we can be more efficient and be all better on the same page again as we move forward. Wendy?
Thanks, Mark. Yeah, and I do agree with Nathan's words. I mean, my understanding in terms of the document that Connie or Lonnie was talking about, I actually made a lot of revisions, and I know we've discussed that, but there's still more work to do. I understood CAP was a fact-finding body. So they would go out and they would get information and they would bring it back. I'm concerned that CAP is negotiating. CAP is not a political advocacy group, as I understand it. They don't have those positions. I don't know how staff can be the political negotiators. That's where I'm concerned in terms of those roles and responsibility. My understanding is that based on the fact finding or the information that comes forward to this table, you know, anything that would go further in terms of negotiating or those next steps would have to be done so by motion through the elected council to go forward. And it's cart before the horse. And I think we're kind of doing this backwards a little bit. You know, the technical experts that are doing this work and have been for a long time is noted. I mean, we should be receiving information about what's the bigger impact, what are the risks, doing that assessment, other matters, because there are things that come to council table, as we all know, that Lands Resources and other members of CAP team are likely not aware of. So it's our job to look at those pieces as well with what's coming from CAP and to do that assessment and what's going on. I mean, Unity is a perfect example of what we're trying to do and who we're trying to work with in doing some of that. So just, you know, I agree with others have said about we need to work on this process and we need to figure out a way to do this. You know, but, and I come back to land claims. I mean, that is the focus of lands and resources. And, you know, that's a full-time commitment just on that land claim, because we've been doing that for, gosh, I don't know, 50 years. Like it's been a long time, and everything looks at the trajectory going forward. It's been a long time yet. So, you know, I think if we have a department that just does that, and then if this is another piece of it, I mean, there's certainly connectors, but looking at what scope and who does what in terms of all of these other pieces when we're looking at YMCA, when we're looking at those things, because we tend to have departments involved in so much that we overstretch them, and we're into all of these pieces, and the focus should be in this particular area is settling that or addressing that land claim and what's going on with the claim. And I know there's a bigger discussion I'm sure we can get into, well, it does and all of those, but you know, there should be some structure and boundaries as well to what that is, and the concentration in the courts and other things. But I mean, I know there's Confederacy, there's a number of issues with all of this, and it's massive. But I think figuring out what that process is and defining, like I disagree that CAP is negotiating on our behalf when we don't know what they're negotiating. So, and not interested in getting into a debate back and forth right now. I think it's a bigger area. I think we agree that we have to look at a process, one that really addresses what we're doing in the community moving forward and those roles. Thanks.
Yeah, and thanks for your comments, Wendy, as well. And I know, you know, from our retreat and follow up to those, you know, it's exactly the conversation, you know, that we had at our retreat, and looking to those engagement pieces. I know, even with our SEO, and thanks for that, Darren, in terms of, you know, defining those roles and looking to that process, as well as with DevCorp, same type of thing, right? In CAP, DevCorp, ourselves, and making sure that, you know, we meet certain thresholds within community and so forth. So, you know, again, that work definitely ongoing, like you mentioned, Wendy, as well. Very, very massive, a lot of work and undertaking under those pieces, but nonetheless, still important work that needs to be completed. So, you know, this is just one aspect as we move forward to have these updates brought back on a monthly basis, this type of reporting. And even further follow up to, you know, as we best move forward in those engagement work. Are there any further questions or comments?
I do. It's Melba. Yeah, I just want to thank
Go ahead.
Lonnie and her and the research team, everyone under Lonnie's directorship, of the extensive work that is being done in various areas, and hopefully this continues, as you said, on a monthly basis. But I wanted to ask where it says improve consultation. It says that in two areas, and that's the area of Brant as well as the county of Brant. And I'm wondering what that really means. Does that mean you're not meeting with them enough, or what does that mean? Bonnie?
Yeah, Robin can answer that.
Yeah, I'd like to speak to that. First of all, thank you for letting me have this opportunity. Consultation, we have this agreement called the Grand River Notification Agreement. So we get notifications from the County of Brant, from the City of Brantford, from Oldham County. And basically what it is just notifications. But we're not necessarily getting the information that we need to be able to make a decision about whether this is, you know, impacting our rights or not. So what we have done is we have met with the planning staff, with the city of, or with the county of Brant, and we've talked to them about the types of, the kind of information that we need to receive from them. So the environmental impact statement, has there been an archaeology dig? Has there been, like, what is the justification for this? And so there's a number of different reports that we read. At the end of the day, I think what is happening is that there is a little bit of confusion between the research, because we're in the Lands and Research Department, and the consultation and accommodation team. The research department is separate from what I do. And what I do is I review all of those notifications that come in, and then ultimately meet with developers, proponents, whatever. So the reason we have met with both the city of Brantford and the county of Brant is because we are asking for, and actually we're going to meet with Haldeman County as well. I'm going to ask for more specific information from them. Environmental impact statements or environmental assessments are very large documents, but at the end of the day, they determine how badly our rights are being impacted. So those are the kinds of documents that we need to be able to see and to understand and to discuss, because with every single development that happens within the Haldeman tract, within the Fort Albanese and Van Treaty territory, those developments are impacting our rights. There's no question about it. The more buildings that go up, the less wildlife that we have, there's less chance for us to collect our medicines, and those are the rights, the hunting rights, those are the rights that are protected by the Constitution Act. So those are the ones that we have to use as our arguments when we meet with these people.
Oh, thank you. You've given examples of what you're faced, and again, councillors and the chief have already mentioned that political advocacy at times are necessary. I think what you're describing here, it would cut down possibly on some of the context that you have, and put the right information in order, so some of these things can get really to the root of the problem of what you're faced at times. So I agree with political being involved and continuing meeting once a month to be updated. So thank you all for having so much work on your table and doing the work for us as you go forward. So I guess we're opening up communication just like you're attempting to open up communication. But I do agree when it comes to areas that is necessary, that the politics really should be involved. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Robin and Melba, for your comments. Are there any further questions or comments? Again, it's good conversation, good discussion. I think we know where we're heading and where we got to go, and looking to improve the pieces, like what have been mentioned, especially around communication and so forth. And so definitely look to continue this ongoing work. So there's a lot of key pieces that we're shifting in towards in actually getting this work complete. That being said, are there any further questions or comments? Okay, seeing or hearing none, then I am looking for a resolution, a motion, just to accept as information in relation to the CAP update at this time. Is there a mover? Moved by Helen, second by Melba. Are there any further questions or comments? Seeing or hearing none, all in favor? Any opposed? Seeing or hearing none, motion's carried. I'll now pass it over to Lonnie to walk us through number 9 and 10 in relation to the addition to reserve. Over to you, Lonnie.
Okay. So the first one, as you recall, Council, that we brought this on back in November, I think, of last year, getting the Birch property in the additions to reserve process. At that time, Council decided not to deal with it because of the sensitive political matters that were going on in Caledonia with respect to Mackenzie Meadows. So this matter was deferred. And so we're now bringing it back for to get the process, to get the land put in the additions to reserve process, because under our agreement with Ontario, when the land was transferred to the numbered company back in 2017, that they would pay the taxes, the land taxes, for 20 years, and it wouldn't be a burden upon us. So you know, there's only 16 more years left, and sometimes the additions to reserve process can take a long time. So we're wanting to get this into the system so that you know, that try to beat before the get it added to the reserve before the reimbursements from the province runs out, and get it into the system where it's no longer part of the municipality and no longer part of the provincial, under provincial jurisdiction. It's just like reserve land that we have here. So we're asking council now, let's move on this and get this in the system. As I said, it was before council last year. It was deferred and back again, so we can get working on this as an addition to our reserve.
Okay, thank you, Lonnie, for that overview. Looking to questions, comments.
Mark, it's Hazel.
Okay, I see Hazel, and then over to Christopher. Hazel, you have the floor.
Yeah, I'll move on that motion.
Okay, moved by Hazel. Again, there's three motions. The first one, it's moved by Hazel. Is there a seconder?
I'll second that.
Second by Carrie. Any further questions or comments? Christopher.
Thanks, Chief. I was just wondering if there's been any study done or any exploration of, and this is my ignorance, so pardon me, but alternatives to any constraints that might be applied to Six Nations use of those lands once it enters the ATR process, or once it becomes formally a part of the reserve. Because of course, once it becomes part of the reserve, it is subject to the Indian Act. So ironically, those lands are now owned by Six Nations through those numbered companies, but are not under Indian Act constraints. Has there been any exploration of alternative ways of administering those lands and including those in the community?
If I could just, there was the previous council had discussions about what they might want to do with the land, but there has never been, I don't think there's been any decision about once it gets added to reserve, what is the use of the property. You know, now it's principally prime agricultural land, and I understand that there is some farming that goes on there, but at least working of the land. But no, once it becomes under the Indian Act, you know, it becomes a normal reserve. It becomes part of the jurisdiction of its legal titles in Her Majesty the Queen and Right of Canada, and the council would have jurisdiction over it. But there has been no discussion about, no resolution about eventually what the land is going to be used for. So the main purpose is just to get it added to the reserve, and those discussions about what intended use or use after it gets added, that's down the road. So that's been the extent of it so far, Chris, as far as I know.
Okay, thanks, Lonnie. Just to clarify, I'm not principally referring to what the land is used for once it's in the reserve or in the intervening time. I'm more so wondering about the legal implications of how it's governed. So in a sense, if the provincial government is willing not to tax it for a certain period of time, once it becomes part of the reserve, the provincial government still won't be taxing it. So there's no, it's not like there's an incentive for the provincial government to get it into the reserve faster, because they're not going to be taxing it if it is in the reserve. So if they've agreed not to tax it in the intervening time while it's not yet in the reserve, is there any room for Six Nations to explore whether or not there are other creative ways to govern those lands prior to it coming under the constraints of the Indian Act?
No, we haven't really, we haven't looked at that, but you know, it's within the council's prerogative to do that, because it's in the name of the numbered corporation, which is wholly owned by council, right? So if you want to look at doing something with that property other than just letting it sit there in the interim, and it's wholly within your council's jurisdiction to do that. But it's still within the, I suppose, it's, until it gets added to reserve, it's still within the provincial system. It's still technically under municipal land use control. So anything that were to be done would have to be done in conjunction with approval from Brant County. For instance, if council says, well, we want to build condominiums on this property, which would be contrary to their bylaw, then, you know, there'd have to be some discussion about how that were to occur. But presently, there is no determination, to my knowledge, about any present use of the land. It just sits there waiting for it to be added to the reserve.
Ahmed?
Okay, thank you for that, Christopher and Lonnie. I just want to first shift over to Nathan and then Helen.
Thanks. Thanks for the information, Lonnie, and bringing this issue forward and remembering the history on this too. Just that quick reminder, and also I'm in full agreement with where Christopher's going with some of this additional kind of scoping. I don't think it impacts the work that's being contemplated in the resolution, because as we all know, the additions to reserves is going to take 100 years. It's a process it takes time. And so that means that we have time to do some scoping, which I think is beneficial to us. I think the issues Christopher laid out are bang on. And I've been kind of thinking in the back of my mind, in terms of Six Nations going forward on this, what are the alternatives, and to begin scoping that out. And like I said, it doesn't impact the work that's already being contemplated in the motion. I think we need to build around this what our additional options are, because like I said, we have time. This is going to take years and years and years, as we all know. The additions to reserve process is a circular process, and it benefits the government of Canada. I think given that, I would like to see some of that additional work as kind of Christopher started to identify in terms of that research, to begin looking at some of these alternative kind of approaches and safeguarding the positioning going into this. And I don't see that as contravening. I see it as actually complementary to what the motion contemplates on this. So the only other thing too is again, it's going to be important for us as we move forward in this additions to reserve, especially with Birch, that we do full-on engagement and communication to the community on this. I know this is a public meeting and we're discussing it, but we should also do a notice to the community that this work is underway, so they're well aware going into this. So my comments so far on this.
Okay, thank you. I think that, again, really good comments, Nathan. You know, as we shift into, because the other piece, and we know that there's multiple properties. We obviously know that there's further advocacy needed to take place in relation to the wait times per se, or the lack of time sensitivity around the additions to reserve process. So we know that that's obviously work that is happening as well. But I just want to pause there and shift over to Helen. Helen had comment as well.
Well, the HCC bought some land, is buying land all over. And they bought some land in Haldeman County somewhere. And the Haldeman County wants to put I don't know what it's called, but the Haldeman County is going to want to cash in on the fact that the Confederacy hasn't paid any taxes on that land, because that land, they were supposed to pay taxes and they didn't pay it. And now the Haldeman County is saying, pay up or we're going to sell the land. So Aaron Detler is supposed to be taking them to court to fight having to pay taxes on the land, even though the Confederacy Council won't support our court case to get an accounting of our monies and lands because they don't believe in the court. But they're going to be going into court to fight the Haldeman County to not pay taxes. It's either Haldeman or Norfolk. I think it's Haldeman, to not pay taxes on the land, because they, Six Nations Elected Council is the only one gets agreements not to pay taxes. Anybody else has to pay taxes. So anyway, they haven't paid taxes on the land. Haldeman County is asking for the money, or they're going to put the land up for sale. And Aaron Detler and the HCCC is taking them into court, and they're going to fight it. So if they are successful, then that would be a good answer for us as well, because we could do the same thing. We could say we're not going to, after 20 years, we're not going to pay taxes on it anyway. So it might be good to keep an eye on that case. I don't know how fast it's going to go, but it would be good to keep an eye on it. And I agree too with what would happen, Lonnie, if we just say no to the powers that be, that we're not going to add it to reserve, that we want it back the way it was taken.
Well, I don't think there's any mechanism to do that.
We could say that though, but we could say to them no.
Well, you can't self-declare that this land is no longer part of the municipality or province because there's already laws in place that govern that. So you'd run right into an obstacle right away. So that's, the additions to reserve is the only game in town presently. So that's the mechanism to take it out of the jurisdiction of municipality, out of the jurisdiction of Ontario. So and it's always been beneficial for us to do that. So
but my question is,
another way to challenge. I mean, I just can't see that being successful, to say we're not going to be paying taxes on this property because it was once originally part of our land, but you wouldn't win that in court, in my opinion. So
well, we're going to find out, I guess, when ACC takes them to court.
Yeah, I suppose we will. We'll see what happens in there, and
but
all the best of luck to them.
I disagree that it's the only game in town. It's the only game that we've ever played. We never tried to play a different game.
Yeah, well, we're not. In the United States, they have a lot of their reservations are held in trust, but they have a different political system there. They're a republic, not a parliamentary system, and their laws have developed different from ours. We don't have trust concepts here in Canada. It's either held by Her Majesty for the benefit of the band, or else it's not. And Phil and I were, and when we were having exploratory discussions with Canada, we were looking at, well, let's look at trust mechanisms like they have in the United States, but we never did finish those discussions on, when new lands come under the reserve, can they be held some way other than under the additions to reserve process? it's an open question yet that has to be resolved some point down the road. But it is presently, as I said, it's the only game in town.
Well, and again, I think this is a good conversation in terms of what we've been speaking of as well, in terms of some of the items leading up to this conversation as well, in terms of creativity and thinking outside of the box. Regardless of if it's the only game in town type of thing, I think it's still important to at least look and explore some of these items. So definitely, I think it's worthwhile, looking and keeping an eye on that case. Are there any further questions or comments in relation to the motion? Okay, seeing or hearing.
I have one more
sorry,
question.
Helen, go ahead.
So if we approve to start this process by putting the name in, we can still change our mind at some point if we choose, right?
Yeah, you could. If it hasn't been completed, you could still do that.
Okay.
Okay, thank you, Helen. Thank you, Lonnie. Are there any further questions or comments? Okay, seeing or hearing none, it's been moved and seconded. All in favor of recommendation 1? Any opposed? Seeing or hearing none, motion is carried. I'll look to recommendation 2. Lonnie, maybe if you just want to touch base on each of these. I know the first one's already good. Second one, this one is in relation for the approving of signatures and the resolution of the ATR. Is there a mover and seconder to 2?
Yeah, that.
I'll move.
On my agenda here.
Moved by Audrey, seconder.
Oh, so that's Painter's Road.
I'll second it, Melba.
Second by Melba. Are there any further questions or comments? Okay, seeing or hearing none. All in favor? Any opposed? Hearing or seeing none, motion is carried. Motion to waive second reading on the first 2 previous motions.
I'll move.
They're moved by Melba, seconder, to waive second reading.
Well, second, it's Hazel.
Second by Hazel. All in favor? Any opposed? Seeing or hearing none, motion is carried. Okay, Lonnie, into our next one.
Yes. So these 2 properties are in Brant County, the Dijak property and the Zolotoric property. They have been in the system for some time now, but we reactivated them again because nothing was being done on that. And so in talking to the federal representatives, they said we need to update with a new resolution to have these properties worked on further. So I think so this would be another council resolution, not to sign those, but they've already been in the system. They've been more or less just sitting there dormant for whatever reason. We want to get them. Activated again. And I might point out that these properties were obtained before 1999, before the Assessment Act was changed to take away that exemption for properties held in trust for Indian bands being exempt from taxation. So we haven't been paying taxes on these, but that doesn't mean that they should sit in that status forever in the municipal jurisdiction and provincial jurisdiction. And as I said, they were already initially at one time put in the reserve process, but we just need to reactivate them with a new resolution from council. That's what we're asking here. And there needs to still be some environmental assessment done on these properties. I don't think they're going to reveal that too much work that has to be done, but we got to get the process started. We got to get these lands added to the reserve. They've been sitting there dormant and in that ATR process for too long, and with nothing being activated on them. So it's back here for council so we can start working on this.
Okay, thanks for that overview, Lonnie. I see Helen has her hand up.
Well, yeah, I guess, why have they been, what do you mean they've been sitting dormant? The INAC hasn't done anything with them?
Well, not really. INAC hasn't. They did some initial work, and it just sat there, and it just got, with all the political stuff going on with respect to Birch, Caledonia, and things like this, that they just sat there, and nobody was really working on them. And we did have a person previously from INAC who had started that, but she retired, and there was nobody from INAC to carry it on. So we brought this to the attention of INAC. Let's finish this off. There isn't really too much work that needs to be done, except maybe a little bit of environmental work. And we can't see why these properties can't be added to the reserve a lot quicker than normal.
So shouldn't we be holding INAC to their responsibilities and obligations instead of re-signing them and sending them back?
Well, we are talking with INAC. We talk with them.
Whoever it is.
We talk with them every month. So we're pushing.
So what makes you think it's going to go faster if we re-sign them and send them again?
Because it'll get their attention that we want these added. They've been sitting there dormant for too long. So I think the thing is we meet with the person every month.
Who's the high up person?
Well, it would be
Yes,
the minister, deputy minister.
Well, that's who we need to get after then, not re-sign documents and send them back, hoping they'll look at it again. We need to go up. Anyway, that's my. I'm flabbergasted.
I agree with Helen. I think it's a sense of really re-strategizing, and it's the advocacy, really, because if the first time around it didn't work, and it if it's just sat there, I agree with Helen. What makes me think the second time it's probably just going to sit there? We're going to have to further. Maybe we can discuss this as well, Lonnie, for further advocacy from the chief's office as well to assist in this, in addition to what council passes today.
Yeah. Okay.
There was one question that had come in relation to, there was a question for Lonnie. Can you explain the difference between allodial title and fee simple?
Yeah, allodial title was it comes from England, and at one point in time before they implemented the fee simple, that the lands were held by the original fiefdoms, I guess what you call them, were important people in the community in England, controlled large blocks of land, and so they claimed title by the fact that they're original owners of the property, and it wasn't. It was something beyond the Crown's control. So, but that when they implemented the new system in England, the Crown had control of all lands, and then that was that kind of title was abolished, that allodial title. So it no longer exists in England. And at some point in time, people have argued that allodial title applies to Indigenous title, although that has never been resolved. It's just simply an argument. But allodial title stems from the original English owners of the land before the Crown became owners of it. So it has like a historical nature to it. So I mean, the people have tried to say that it somehow applies to Indian lands, although that has never been established yet. But that's kind of the explanation that I'm aware of in any event.
Okay, thank you, Lonnie, for that. I do see a number of hands being raised. I'll first start with Nathan and then over to Wendy. Nathan, you have the floor.
Thanks, Chief. And I think I like the way the discussion is going, because I think we can't just rely on the additions to reserve process. We need to begin scoping out some of the issues that Christopher identified in our first half of this discussion, the issues you're identifying, Chief. And one of the things, and I said it at the first half, the benefit of going through additions to reserve is a secular process. It takes so long. So that gives us time to do some of this alternative work. But I kind of agree where Helen and Chief are going. Like, what's the point of applying to this if it's still going to identify issues? So what's our alternatives going into these pieces? And the other thing too, this addition to reserve, it's referred to in the government language as a policy. So this is their policy approach in terms of the policy and the process to go forward on this. And there have been a number of reform attempts into this type of work. So there's been that political advocacy from that collective First Nation standpoint as well, for trying to reform the process to be, more friendly to First Nations, I guess. And that works for Ontario. That work is dominantly headed up by Chief Wilfred King, who holds that portfolio on behalf of all First Nations in Ontario. So it would be good to kind of get just an update on what has been proposed, what they're discussing at that level, see if anything's helpful. I'm suspecting it won't be, but in the event, I think we need dual strategies on this, and start working from a different angle to look at what alternatives that we have, as kind of Christopher and others have laid out. So that's kind of where I'm at in my comments right now. I don't think it'll impact where we're going with the current strategy, but I think we need to build some areas around this.
Definitely agree, Nathan, to those points. Again, just for any additional advocacy and support, really, is what we're speaking of. Wendy, over to you.
Yeah, and just wanted to reemphasize that, Mark, and support what you're saying, what Helen's saying. I mean, this just makes a case in point about political advocacy, right? That's a role that your office, councillors need to play in getting this done, rather than just following the same process over and over again. And I agree with what Helen is saying, that, we need new strategy. We need to be addressing things in a different way. When we talk about arguments being made, well, when arguments get won, that's how changes get made, right? We have to keep that in mind. Sometimes we can be very bureaucratic, and I think we have to stop buying into that process and going at it with new strategy and doing things differently and putting those arguments forward that are, Indigenous law and things like that. So I just wanted to reemphasize that. I think the need is really there to change how we're doing this.
Okay, thank you, Wendy, for your comments as well. So I think I just wanted to check in. It's been moved and seconded already, correct, Teresa?
Yes, it has.
Okay, thanks for that. So we do know, again, just recognizing not to go stray away from the conversation, but obviously we know that there's additional advocacy pieces in addition to this motion on the floor right now. So I just want to look to see if there's any further questions or comments in relation to the motion.
Mark, just for clarity, so this motion is to to resubmit?
Yes,
So we're
that's
saying,
to my knowledge.
No, it's not gonna
So-
start the
so-
process over. If I could,
so if we're
It's
saying
already in the
that,
process. It's just to hurry it on up.
so if I can
Right.
finish what I'm saying, Lonnie, if that's okay?
Yeah.
So if we're saying that we should just pursue advocacy, does it make sense not to pass a motion and to just rely on the submission that's already there and then do something with that?
So, sorry, Wendy, are you suggesting to have a motion in relation to the additional advocacy?
No, so the discussion's been around, others have raised it. Why would we resubmit the same and go through the same process when we already have a submission in? So if we're in agreement with that and agree rather that we should just practice advocacy and try and get movement on this, I mean, why do we need the motion? Because this is starting over.
Right.
So if, I agree with Helen, what others have said, why redo the process again?
Right, I hear what you're saying now. So just want to check in to Lonnie on your thoughts on that piece.
Yeah, so we're not initiating a new process. It's been in the system. We're just bringing this motion for it so we can be reactivated and put on a fast track. I just want to say that what Nathan said, that this is a policy, additions to reserve policy. Actually, I was amazed to find out that the federal government passed legislation in 2019 called Additions to Reserve Act, and it's actually now no longer policy. It's actually in legislation. So and you can find it. If you go to Google, you'll find the legislation there. So I understand. It's been in system so long that why should we have to go through this process? It's for our purposes. We can push it a lot faster once we have this new resolution to impress upon the government. Let's get working on this. Let's get it finalized. So it's more in support of what has already been started years ago before I came into this job. So
really all what we're saying, this is we can still continue on this piece, but we'll have further advocacy from our office in a sense, and maybe set up meetings with the deputy minister or so forth to maybe assist in further expediting this process.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks for that, Nathan.
Not really related to this, but now you sparked another question for me. Can we get an update and a list? Maybe Christopher can do some investigation on any other pieces of legislation that Trudeau and Perry Bellegarde snuck through without our knowledge. I had no knowledge of that, and I'd like to know other areas that they snuck through legislation without our knowledge.
Yeah, perhaps maybe even if we could make a note, Christopher, on that piece in relation to any outstanding legislation that we know, so we can look to those pieces. Helen.
Yeah, well, I was going to say the same thing as Nathan. This is the Reserve Act. I never heard of it. How come we didn't know about it? Why were we not? Was First Nations consulted on this, and did anybody know anything? Like, where did it come from?
Yeah, see, and the only thing I could recall, I think it was in 2018, that was at the AFN during that time, but if there was no discussion at that point in time in relation to what it is now, if it's an act, as opposed to rather just a policy. So there's definitely been some lack of communication in that area. Wendy.
Yeah, this is a whole other agenda, right? What we're in, but so I have no problem with what Lonnie just said. That is intended and meant, but that's not what the motion says. The motion is addition to reserve. It's an application to be approved for signature. So it's not an advocacy motion. This is reapplying. So what Lonnie communicated is different. I have no problem with that. But I don't think we should be sending in another application because it's already there, right? We're just getting wrapped up. And in terms of what Nathan said in his comment of why don't we know, we pay lawyers, we pay a firm millions of dollars. So about the land claim, and I would think they should be sharing this information very timely when it occurs, legislation, because it has impact to what we do. That should be, they should be advising us on this information. So it shouldn't be 3 years old.
Again, good point, and thank you for that, Wendy. So just to reiterate in relation to the motion, so there is what Wendy is saying in a sense is we don't need this motion, but rather how do we further, look to advocate on this behalf to the Dijak property and these two properties, rather that is. So I'm just wondering, in a sense, looking to, I see Audrey has her hand up for any questions or comments, but just before then, in a sense, so it's not, I do recognize what Lonnie is saying. So Lonnie, is there any way in a sense that we can maybe reword, or is there a specific motion in relation to what you have said?
I can't, I can't off the top of my head, I can't think of anything more that
Because recommends that the council resolution, so it's not really, it's the council resolution that's already there, correct?
some time ago, I don't know how long ago that previous resolution was made. It was certainly was made before I came in this job in 2007.
Okay,
Marcy,
thanks. Thanks for that, Lonnie.
I think Marcy's on the, is she on the meeting? She might have some information on perhaps when the first resolution was made.
I think Marcy had to step off. I just seen on my screen that she had to leave, or it said that she had left. I'll just check in with Audrey, and then we'll wrap this up to next steps, Council. Audrey?
Yeah, have you had a mover for this and a seconder that you said you had?
Yes.
Okay.
Actually, no, it wasn't second or moved yet. Sorry, I was looking at the previous one.
Okay, well, I'll make a motion because I agree with what Lonnie is saying here. There's a signature, it refreshes it, it gets back in their front of their eyes again. They know that this council is serious about it, and let's get moving on it. So I'll make a motion, and then we can follow up with all the political advocacy that we need to help push this through and get it added to the reserve lands. It's been sitting there since 1999. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Audrey. It's moved by Audrey. Is there a seconder?
I'll second it.
I'll second it. It's Melba.
Second by Hazel. Are there any further questions or comments?
Good question.
Nathan?
Yeah, for clarity. So are you amending the resolution to reflect the advocacy, or are you not?
We're not. We'll still just again continue this obviously outside of the motion, unless the mover and seconder is looking to amend to include the political advocacy in addition to the signatures needed. Looking to Audrey and Hazel.
Make a second motion to do the political advocacy, but I think they should stay as it is right now, and then I'll do a second one.
Okay, it's been moved and second. Are there any further questions or comments?
Yeah, just again, point of order. If the motion can reflect the actual action, which is a resubmit, then I'd be okay. But if it's not worded that way, I don't think I can support it, because the motions are very important. They need to reflect what's actually going on. So if we can get the motion to reflect a reapplication and an acknowledgement that this has been done before by way of the whereases, then I can approve this. I can approve it if it's not reflective of what is actually going on.
Nate, I'm willing to do that and to include that in the motion. Lonnie, no problem.
Sorry, Council, just
Mark, I got no problem with that. It's just that, but we still need the council resolution, just the ordinary resolution, right? Yeah, it can reflect that, but as long as the resolution is eventually signed saying, INAC, get working on this. We need to have this done.
I'm just wondering in terms of like we've been waiting this long in a sense, and just to kind of from what I'm hearing
Well-
from the conversation, is there a possibility to even look, because I know that it's not a resubmission, but I hear what everyone is saying. So just looking to see if that is a possibility to bring us back at tomorrow's GC with the necessary worded changes that we're speaking of, Lonnie.
Yeah, could do that.
Is that okay if we can do that? And that way, I think that will help suffice looking to the mover and seconder, if that's okay, if we can hold off until tomorrow's session so that we can come back with the exact wording in which Wendy and Nathan and others, Helen, are speaking of, so that then we can be more comfortable in relation to what is actually going to be passed within the motion.
Okay,
That's good for me. I'm okay with that, Mark.
okay.
I'm okay, Mark. It's Hazel.
Okay, thank you for that. So we'll look to Lonnie just on those pieces to come back with a new revised motion so that we can again have further deliberation and decision.
Okay.
So we'll look to that for tomorrow and add that. Okay, council, that's all I have on the open session. Is there anything further?
I just have a question.
Sure, go ahead, Helen.
So the resolution coming back is still going to ask us to resubmit the application? I don't know. Why are we doing this? Why don't we just work on trying to get them started? Give us a
Yeah,
chance.
I hear
Give
you.
us a chance to try and work on INAC to get this thing going. Then if they don't, then I guess you resubmit the application because it's already in there. See, it just seems to me like we're letting INAC off the hook by resubmitting another application that's going to sit there for another 20, 40 years. We need to find out why it's been sitting there. And we want to know why they haven't dealt with it. We want to know why it hasn't moved anywhere. And I think we need to do that first before we submit anything. I don't agree with resubmitting because INAC is supposed to be doing it. Anyway.
I hear you loud and clear on that piece as well, Helen. And I think, Lonnie, to that piece, is there a way that maybe even for our offices to connect and maybe possibly set up a meeting on this whole process in itself with the minister? Obviously we know that, government getting back in and so forth.
Mm-hmm.
But is there an opportunity for us to even look to that piece as opposed to doing this route first?
Well, I think that would be up to your office, Chief, because we don't normally deal with the political end unless we perhaps move up to the assistant deputy minister level or something like that.
Okay, so just with that being said, Lonnie, if we can you just leave it with Christopher and myself at this point in time, and we'll look to obviously connect with you and then set that meeting up further so that we can again expedite this process. Because I hear Helen, I hear Wendy and others. Like when we look to the resubmission of this and the wording, we do have to be more strategic in our advocacy. So just wondering if you could just leave that with our office at this point, and Christopher and I can have a chat off the line, and we will connect with you, Lonnie, and then go from there.
Okay, fine.
Okay, that sounds good. Thanks, Helen. Thanks, others, all for your input and feedback. We'll look to again provide this, and just for note of as we move forward in terms of process. So this item would be added to the action item list. So Teresa, I know we have to have a meeting with all secretaries and so forth, just so that we know that things aren't falling between the cracks, and that we're continuing to put all resolutions that need action on that list, so that we can again keep abreast of where things are and the status of each. So just a little FYI. That's all I have for the open session, council. Is there a motion to adjourn? Moved by Wendy, seconder.
I'll second Hazel.
Second by Hazel. All in favor? Any opposed? Seeing or hearing none, motion is carried. Again, thank you for joining us this morning at Political Liaison. As you can see, a lot of work happening and ongoing work. We'll look to provide even further status updates as we move forward. So thank you. Have a good day.
All right.